What's up, everybody? Jared here. So, happy 2022, happy new year from Finland. I hope you guys are having a great start to the year. And today I am here to talk about the new Adam McKay movie, Don't Look Up, a movie that has sparked quite a bit of conversation and a movie that I overall think is interesting. Now, this is going to be just like the Matrix analysis / review that I previously did, in that I'm going to start off talking about the qualitative aspects of the movie, what I thought about it as a film, then I'm going to move on to what I think the movie is trying to say, and then I'm going to finish off with what I think about what the movie is trying to say. All right, so let's just start off with the cast, which is, of course, as you can imagine, I would say this because it's true, it's ridiculous. I mean, with Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Cate Blanchett, Tyler Perry. I love it when Tyler Perry does kind of more serious, kind of subtle comedy roles, like he did in Gone Girl. Jonah Hill, Meryl Streep, you know, one of the finest American actors to ever live. Obviously, this movie is going to be fun to watch. Watching these performers do pretty much anything is going to be fun and enjoyable and awesome. I mean, they could take the worst script in the world and at least make it compelling in some way. So overall, I mean, yeah, the movie's really enjoyable. I think Adam McKay is a legitimately talented filmmaker. I think that his abilities as a director are extremely apparent in the fact that all of these really incredible actors are in top form. And I think a lot of them are really funny. I think the movie is legitimately funny. But I think the most impressive thing about the movie is just how dense it is. I mean, the movie is an overall criticism, a satire that kind of takes a jab or pokes fun at a lot of the problems and excesses of our current age. So in this movie, we get sensationalism and spectacle in media usurping substance. So, you know, the fact that Leo is a scientist telling everyone that the world is going to end doesn't matter as much as the fact that Leo plays a scientist who's really good looking. There's, of course, the tragic short-sightedness of the current political landscape. For example, Meryl Streep's president character cares more about maintaining power than she does about, you know, staying alive or human survival. There's also a fair amount about politics becoming tabloids, you know, like we've seen in the past couple of years of American politics as well as around the world. And in the movie, we see that, gosh, what was it? That Meryl Streep's character only recognizes the comet as an impending doom because she's trying to distract people from the fact that she sent a picture of her cooch to a Supreme Court nominee who is a porn star. There's, of course, nepotism with Jonah Hill being the son of the president, who's also the head of staff. Of course, climate change, we're going to talk more about that, but the primary reading of the film is that the comet is a stand-in for climate change. I really like the tech giant character and how basically he came to be such a wealthy man and such a powerful man in American society because the goal of his technology is to tranquilize all anxiety and amuse all boredoms and consider it progress. There's an emphasis on data replacing humanity. There's a really nice part at the beginning of the movie where a little girl that's part of the tech giant's stage performance, where he's talking about his technology, wants to tell this man that she loves him. And he completely ignores her and wants to talk more about, oh, did the puppy on a rooster video, did that really hit our data numbers enough? There's also Jennifer Lawrence's boyfriend writing about having sex with her just for clicks. Again, our insistence on satiating people's desire for content and generating as many clicks as we need to make these business models economically viable makes people do really disgusting things like, you know, talk about, your sexual relationship with someone you previously loved. There's also a little bit there on how data is only valuable in relation to how it helps capitalism. There's the discussion after their initial appearance on the news where they discuss, you know, where they were getting the most tweets and clicks, and, you know, it didn't really matter again how important the actual substance of what they were saying was, that we're all going to die, rather just what was generating the most ad revenue, the most clicks. There's a fair amount on toxic positivity that I think was quite smart. I think that, the newscasters are constantly trying to keep the conversation positive, even if we are talking about the end of the world. There's a bit on over-medication, a bit about science being distorted by PR, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. There's a really funny, very small, short joke about how the stock market is completely untethered to fundamentals, which is funny because everyone says the world is going to end, and the stock market, rises a very steep rise. And of course, after the GameStop fiasco about a year ago, that was really funny. Of course, we see that politicians are lapdogs to donors, and that algorithms are invading privacy to a ridiculous extent. So again, it's really impressive that this movie is able to pack all of these insights into one narrative. And actually, most of these insights just come within the first act. So I think that that's, again, really impressive. I am a little bit disappointed that there was no real confrontation between Jennifer Lawrence and DiCaprio's character, especially as DiCaprio, because he polls better than her. He starts taking the spotlight more. He starts taking credit for more of her work. There's not really any character arcs in this movie. I mean, other than Leonardo DiCaprio deciding that it's ultimately the right decision to go back to his family. But other than that, really the movie is kind of, rather than saying that Leonardo DiCaprio or Jennifer Lawrence's character are the protagonists of the movie, it really is just kind of a social landscape that's the focus of the movie. So overall, I mean, I think the qualities of the movie, it's very watchable, it's very fun, and I've seen it twice now, and I enjoyed my time. So I think that, that's very positive. What I think the movie is trying to say. Again, I'm going to be a little bit critical of the people who really just stop at saying that this is about climate change, because I think that's, we're not really looking far enough there. In social work, there's kind of this metaphor that is often used that I actually learned about in the book by Jason Hickel called The Divide. And basically, the story is that we as people who are trying to develop the third world and try to, lift people out of poverty, we liken ourselves to people who are helping people who are drowning as they come on shore. And so people are focused on lifting people out of the water so that they don't drown. But ultimately, they're never going to make any progress until they find out, wait, why are people actually jumping in the water? Why are these people drowning? Why are people who don't know how to swim or are not, trained how to swim in the water? And unless you go past the shore to the source where these people are jumping into the water, you're never going to make any progress. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think that by saying that this movie is just an overall, or that the climate is that the comet is a stand-in for climate change, I think you're really missing the big picture, because ultimately, I mean, just like The Matrix Resurrections, it's ultimately about capitalism. In fact, if I would bet money, not a lot of money, but I would bet money that this entire movie is based on the famous Mark Fisher quote that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And then the reason why it's more apt to say that the movie is about capitalism destroying the world than climate change is, first of all, is because climate change is basically a result of us prioritizing the needs of capital over the needs of ecology. And this is a problem that still persists today, and not a lot of change has been done, and not a lot of progress has been made. But secondly, in the movie, when we transition into basically the midpoint of the movie, when that first mission to destroy the comet is derailed, it's done so for a very specific reason. It's because they need more mining materials for technology. And I think this was this is actually probably my favorite part of the movie, and what I actually think is probably the most impressive part of the movie is that the midpoint is actually very powerful from a critical perspective, because this mining materials and minerals are basically a great source and a great focus point to really discuss the excesses of capitalism. I mean, not only is it that capital has made it so that we are continually, invading other countries and having these turf wars in order to have the appropriate minerals in order to make technology, but also it's allowed for some of the worst humanitarian crises in the world to remain happening. For example, the philosopher Slavoj Žižek, the dude who's right there, he often talks about how there's been this horrible civil war in the Congo that has lasted for decades and is being maintained because all these Western powers need have access to coltan, which is a which is a product that is essential into the construction of cell phones and smartphones. And so as long as that order of power is maintained, then we have access to these minerals that basically make the world go round. So I think that ultimately the whole second half of the movie, we've kind of solved the climate change problem. Now it's time to talk at the bigger fish is what are the driving forces that are making us prioritize things other than climate, other than the longevity of the human race. I also thought it was kind of interesting in my Matrix Resurrections review, I talked about how I thought it was a really strong statement about how the analyst is kind of a implicit criticism of the psychiatric and psychology industry. And we see something kind of similar here in that when Jennifer Lawrence's character first goes on the news and screams, "You're all gonna die," somebody says to her, at that point still boyfriend but soon to be ex-boyfriend, hey, I have a friend who's bipolar and you might want to get her checked out. And again, I think that this is a criticism that I'm actually happy to see more Hollywood films taking part in, and more Hollywood films, bringing to the fore, because I think that in a way this psychology and psychiatric industries have gone a little bit too far in basically making their entire practice just kind of a little band-aid to allow you to function within a horrible situation, and then if the situation can't be fixed and we've lost all hope that one can actually change their situation or change the situation of the society around them, then the best you can do is just numb the pain. And it was a very short part of the movie, but I thought it was very insightful and something that I'm glad to see. Now, what I think the movie is trying to say. Now, this is where, or what I think about what the movie is trying to say. This is where I actually stop liking the movie. And I actually think that the movie is kind of annoying. There's a part in the movie where there's a distinction made between productive art and douchey art. So there's a character, I think it's even played by Chris Evans, although I haven't looked it up, where he is promoting a movie called Total Destruction, which is a Hollywood movie that is basically a Hollywood narrativization of the comet hitting Earth, and it's like 2012 or like those Roland Emmerich movies. And then that's contrasted with the next scene later with what's the character that Ariana Grande plays? She and her boyfriend, who have been the subject of all these tabloid exhibits, basically run this concert, and her lyrics are saying how bad we've all messed up as a society, and we have Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence's character introducing them. And basically, I think ultimately Adam McKay thinks of him as that second piece of art, the Ariana Grande piece of art that is actually productive, that is not just distracting people from the problem, that is actually, more progressive joy, progressive art with a progressive message rather than just inane joy. But honestly, my message or my reaction to that is, Adam McKay, don't flatter yourself. There's no difference. There's no real difference between the inane joy from a movie like 2012 or the fictional Total Destruction and the kind of joy derived from, hearing a progressive message, because both of them ultimately promote complacency. And they really pose no threat to the system being capitalism that is perpetuating this, horrible doomsday scenario. So like I mentioned in the Matrix review, this movie, just like The Matrix, is made for only one reason, and it is to increase Netflix's stock. Now, the difference between this movie and The Matrix Resurrections that is that at least The Matrix movie recognizes this impotence and comments on it and realizes that, hey, in my review I said it's very much Lana Wachowski waving her hands around the world and saying, hey, I can't fix the system. Whereas the thing that's annoying about this movie is it really flaunts its altruism. It seems to be very magnanimous, and it's saying like, oh, I can point out these excesses and these kind of, morally gross things in our society, and therefore I have proven that I've elevated myself above it, and this message is ultimately progress towards solving these issues, which I think is completely false. And it's really kind of the most annoying thing about Hollywood liberals, Hollywood liberalism, is that, it's only these like baby teeth, like a baby gumming its teeth trying to bite something. That's like the strength of criticism they can have, because they're allowed to, criticize the system, but they're not allowed to promote an alternative. Not that I'm saying that, don't take that as me saying that I think that communism is a great alternative. I don't know anyone who thinks that. I'll get more to it later. But one other thing I want to bring up is that I think that ultimately this movie is actually counterproductive. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the way that conservatives are personified, because they're personified as gullible, and that they're manipulated by sociopaths who have nothing but contempt for them. And again, I think this is only deepening the divide. That makes it impossible to really address for us to even have a prayer to address the inner contradictions of capitalism that are coming to threaten our way of life. We're only going to be able to do that by having everyone on the same page, and by demonizing, half of the country and calling them gullible, calling them stupid, is counterproductive. But I also think that the criticism implicit in this message contradicts itself. Because in the movie, there is this general notion that those who question the good scientists are ignorant, gullible, and childish in their position. Yet, there's a character who's an anesthesiologist, who's the head of NASA, who denies the comet's existence because she's either trying to maintain funding, or she's a lapdog to the president because it's politically expedient. And this is a real criticism about, science, that it's oftentimes, the people who are public facing or the people who are running these institutions are not scientists. They're really just public relations professionals. And so the problem I have with this is that you can't simultaneously criticize the PRification of the system of science, not the practice of science, not the scientific method, but the way that science is actually structured and communicated to the public. You can't criticize that and blame people for doubting the scientific authority. So if you're calling people gullible for questioning science, yet the only way that they're communicated science is by these kinds of corrupt PR emphasizing characters that your movie is also criticizing, then there's a contradiction here, and I don't really think that a very productive, interesting critique is actually going on then. So another example is that Ariana Grande's performance, and I don't mean her singing performance, but actually just her performance as an actress, and she exaggerates her ditziness. And honestly, and this is not really a dig at Ariana Grande, but it's a dig at how Ariana Grande's persona functions in our spectacle-obsessed society. Her regular persona accomplishes the same thing that she's criticizing without her emphasizing the ditziness. And so I honestly think that it would have been a lot more self-reflective and a lot more biting if she just acted like herself. There's no reason to act extra ditzy. Back to what I was talking about in terms of how these kind of Hollywood rich liberals, limousine liberals can, this movie just doesn't have the awareness that, that Adam McKay can only criticize the system that's going to kill us all so long as it doesn't compromise the system at all. And, that ultimately perpetuates the problem. Again, this deepens the divide. It provides an illusion of activism. It gives Hollywood liberals the kind of affirmation that they are morally correct without actually doing anything. And that's a real problem. I just think that it's possible that, in a very dismal vision of the future that might look a lot like this movie might be remembered as a kind of obscene display in which all of the people who will not suffer from the various crises of capitalism, your Meryl Streeps, your Leonardo DiCaprios, your Jennifer Lawrences, all of these very, very wealthy people who would very likely have a seat on the ship that leaves Earth, where all of these people are lecturing us about the crises of capitalism and, the poor rednecks who are keeping us from actually doing anything about it. I think there's a possibility that this movie ages very poorly. Now, I also want to say, what is the answer? And I just really want to answer that with a book recommendation. It's a book that I recommended at the end of my previous stream with Diego Rosarin, and it is The Listening Society by Hansi Freinecht. He talks very much about a path that is not left, not right, but forward. I know that sounds cheesy, and ultimately, a core rule of the book is that you can only have solidarity with somebody if you have solidarity with their subjectivity, which means that you have to identify with, the quote unquote ignorant rednecks as well as, the enlightened scientists or whatever. So at the end of the day, do I think this movie is entertaining? Yes. Do I think this movie is clever? Yes. Do I think this movie is productive? Absolutely not. I think that it's, in fact, counterproductive. And when we talk about meta-modern art, I think that this movie definitely needs a little bit more self-awareness in order to be really taken seriously as a real piece of criticism or as a real piece of satire. So that's it for me. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more movie content and more content in general. I've got some exciting stuff coming up. Me and Diego are going to be playing Elden Ring together, so I'm really excited to kind of try my hand at doing gaming. I'm not good at these games, I must confess, but really looking forward to continuing on this channel. I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm having a lot of fun engaging with the audience and building a relationship with you guys. So it's been a really fulfilling last half of 2021, and I'm looking forward to it being a essential, fulfilling part of 2022. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. Peace.